Shocking. Azerbaijan joins forces with Ukraine to defeat Russia quickly. In the midst of a war that has already changed the map of Europe, an unexpected alliance could change everything once again. But this story doesn't begin on a battlefield, it begins aboard a plane. It was a quiet morning. 67 passengers boarded an ordinary flight from Baku to Grozny. None of them knew they were about to become part of something much bigger and much darker. Minutes after takeoff, the plane simply disappeared from radar. When it reappeared, its route had changed drastically. It was crossing the Caspian Sea, heading toward Kazakhstan. The crash images left even experts in shock. The fuselage didn't show signs of technical failure, but rather perfectly circular holes. It wasn't random, it was precise, as if it had been hit by a high-precision military weapon. And then the suspicions began. Had Russia shot down the plane to send a message? Or was the flight the victim of something even darker, in a game of espionage between allies and traitors? Why, right after the incident, did mass arrests begin, media outlets get shut down, and diplomatic expulsions occur? What secrets were on board that plane? And what is Azerbaijan's real role next to Ukraine in this decisive moment of the war? None of this seems like a coincidence, and maybe it really isn't. The truth behind Flight 8243 could reveal a new chapter of the war, one nobody was prepared to witness. A chapter that could totally change the war in Ukraine. To understand this tragedy, we need to go back to December 25, 2024. The Azerbaijan Airlines Embraer 190 took off normally from Baku, Azerbaijan's capital, bound for Grozny, in the Chechnya region, southern Russia. It was a routine flight the airline regularly operated. On board were 62 passengers and 5 crew members, ordinary people on a trip that was supposed to be completely normal. But about 40 minutes after takeoff, when the aircraft entered Russian airspace and neared Grozny, something went terribly wrong. The crew reported a complete loss of GPS navigation systems. It was as if the plane had gone blind in the air, unable to know exactly where it was or where it was heading. At that moment, Russian air traffic controllers denied permission to land in Grozny. That alone was strange, but what came next was even more disturbing. Instead of directing the aircraft to a nearby alternative airport in Russia, the controllers apparently guided the pilot to fly over the Caspian Sea, a completely unusual and dangerous route. The flight's captain, showing extraordinary courage, managed to keep the aircraft in the air longer than anyone would have thought possible. He crossed the Caspian Sea and attempted an emergency landing at Aktau Airport in Kazakhstan. The crash images are devastating. The plane trying to land, catching fire, and breaking in half. But here's a detail that saved lives. Even with the aircraft severely damaged, 29 people survived the impact. When the first images of the crash began circulating, aviation experts immediately noticed something very specific: the damage pattern on the aircraft's fuselage. It wasn't typical damage from a mechanical failure or adverse weather conditions. The holes in the rear part of the plane had very distinct features, small, perfectly round, and distributed in a way consistent with what experts call a fragmentation pattern. These are exactly the kind of marks caused by anti-aircraft missiles, specifically missiles that explode near the aircraft and send a shower of metal fragments toward the target. The photographic evidence was so clear that international aviation experts began making public statements just days after the crash. But the evidence didn't stop there. Investigators discovered that at the exact moment Flight 8243 was approaching Grozny, the region was under heavy attack by Ukrainian drones. This information is crucial to understanding what happened. Grozny, Chechnya's capital, had become a frequent target of Ukrainian airstrikes in the months leading up to the incident. Just a few weeks earlier, in December, Ukrainian drones had hit special police facilities in Grozny on at least 3 separate occasions. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov had publicly confirmed those attacks and vowed retaliation. The region was on high alert, with air defense systems activated and nervous operators awaiting further strikes. To fully understand this tragedy, we need to talk about how the conflict between Russia and Ukraine had spread far beyond its original borders. Since the beginning of 2024, Ukraine had adopted a completely new strategy, striking strategic targets inside Russian territory, especially oil refineries and military installations. The Ukrainian logic was simple and devastatingly effective. As Ukrainian journalist Ilya Ponomarenko explained, Russia funds its military operations with oil exports. You can't persuade countries like India and China to stop buying, so you hit the refineries. This strategy proved incredibly successful, forcing Russia to expand its air defenses into areas that were once considered completely safe. Grozny had become a particularly attractive target for Ukrainians for one specific reason. It housed the 2nd Regiment of the Akhmad Kadyrov Special Police, a unit directly involved in military operations in Ukraine. Hitting that facility wasn't just a tactical strike, it was symbolic, a direct hit on forces loyal to Putin in the region. In the days leading up to the crash of Flight 8243, tensions in the region had reached extreme levels. On December 4th, Ukrainian drones attacked the regiment's facilities, damaging the roof and injuring guards. On December 12th, there was another strike, again hitting the same target. On December 15th, another drone strike hit key military infrastructure in Grozny. Each attack made air defense operators more nervous and quicker on the trigger. It was an environment where anything in the sky that wasn't immediately identified as friendly could be considered a threat. But what made this case unique was how fast the truth came to light. Unlike other similar incidents that took months or even years to be clarified, the evidence here was so clear that the investigation progressed extraordinarily fast. Azerbaijani government sources confirmed exclusively to European network Euronews that the preliminary investigation had definitively concluded that a Russian surface-to-air missile caused the crash. According to those sources, the missile was fired at Flight 8243 during aerial drone activity over Grozny. The timing was devastatingly precise, right when Russian air defense systems were responding to Ukrainian drone attacks. The investigation revealed even more disturbing details about what happened after the aircraft was hit. Apparently, Russian air traffic controllers not only denied permission for an emergency landing at nearby Russian airports, but directed the damaged plane to fly over the Caspian Sea. Investigators are exploring the disturbing possibility that this was done deliberately to hide evidence of what had happened. The international reaction was immediate and severe. Azerbaijan's president, Ilham Aliyev, didn't mince words. In an interview with Azerbaijani state television, he declared, "We can say with complete clarity that the plane was shot down by Russia." Aliyev demanded Moscow take responsibility, compensate the victims, and prosecute those responsible. This was an extraordinarily strong diplomatic statement, especially considering that Azerbaijan and Russia maintain relatively close relations. Azerbaijan is a member of the Russian-led Commonwealth of Independent States and traditionally avoids direct confrontations with Moscow. The fact that Aliyev made such blunt statements shows the seriousness of the situation and the strength of the evidence. Russia's response was initially characterized by denial and shifting blame. The Kremlin first suggested the crash might have been caused by adverse weather or technical failure. When those explanations became unsustainable in light of the evidence, Russia shifted its strategy to a limited admission of responsibility. Vladimir Putin eventually called President Aliyev, but even in that conversation, the language was carefully chosen. Putin expressed condolences and said the aircraft had attempted to land in Grozny several times amid Ukrainian drone attacks and Russian air defense responses. It was an indirect admission that Russian systems were active in the area. This incident represents much more than an isolated tragedy. It illustrates how modern conflicts can spread in completely unexpected ways, threatening civilians who have absolutely no connection to the hostilities. The case tragically recalls Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17, shot down over Ukraine in 2014, killing 298 people. That case also involved surface-to-air missile systems striking a civilian aircraft during active conflict. The similarity is no coincidence. Both cases show the dangers of operating civil aviation near active conflict zones with air defense systems on high alert. But there is a crucial difference between the two cases. In the MH17 case, the aircraft was flying over contested territory amid active fighting. In the case of Flight 8243, the aircraft was on a regular, approved commercial route, routinely operated, when it was hit by defense systems from a country that theoretically should have been protecting, not threatening, civilian air traffic. This incident also raises serious questions about air safety protocols during conflict. How can air defense systems distinguish between hostile military aircraft and civilian planes? How should air traffic controllers respond when civilian aircraft are inadvertently hit? And most importantly, how can we ensure tragedies like this never happen again? The tragedy of Flight 8243 teaches us several painful lessons about modern civil aviation. First, it shows how regional conflicts can create danger zones for civil aviation far beyond direct combat areas. When Ukraine began striking targets deep within Russian territory, it triggered a network of active air defense systems in regions that were previously considered safe for commercial flights. Second, the incident highlights the need for stricter protocols for coordination between military operations and civil aviation. In a world where drones can strike hundreds of kilometers from their launch bases, practically any region can become an active conflict zone with little or no warning. Third, the response of Russian air traffic controllers after the incident raises deep concerns about responsibility and transparency. If a civilian aircraft is inadvertently hit by friendly fire, the appropriate response is to provide every possible assistance to minimize loss of life, not to hide evidence or deny responsibility. But the truth is that behind all the geopolitical analysis and technical discussions, we must not forget that 38 people lost their lives in this tragedy. They were ordinary passengers on a routine trip, perhaps returning home for the holidays, maybe traveling for business or visiting family. Among them were both pilots and a flight attendant, people who dedicated their careers to safely transporting passengers. The heroism of the crew on this flight cannot be understated. After being struck by missile fragments, losing critical navigation systems, and being denied permission to land at nearby airports, they managed to keep the plane in the air long enough to cross the Caspian Sea and attempt an emergency landing. The fact that 29 people survived this crash is a direct testament to the skill and dedication of these professionals. The case of Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243 stands as a grim reminder of how modern conflicts can endanger civilians in completely unexpected ways. In an era of long-range drone warfare and automated air defense systems, the lines between combat zones and civil airspace are becoming dangerously blurred. This tragedy also highlights the critical importance of transparency and accountability when such incidents occur. The swift investigation and release of evidence in this case stand in stark contrast to decades of denial and cover-ups that often follow military incidents involving civilians. Perhaps the most important lesson is that in our interconnected world, regional conflicts have global consequences in ways we don't always foresee. A drone strike in Chechnya can create conditions that endanger a routine commercial flight between two countries not even directly involved in the main conflict. The 38 victims of Flight 8243 deserve more than just our condolences. They deserve for us to learn from this tragedy and work to ensure it never happens again. That means stricter air safety protocols, better coordination between military operations and civil aviation, and above all, a commitment to transparency and accountability when things go wrong. As investigators continue analyzing black box data and physical evidence, one thing is already clear. Flight 8243 has become a tragic symbol of how modern conflicts can threaten innocent people in ways they never imagined when they boarded that plane on what seemed like a perfectly normal December morning.